Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so you covered your first date with Dad.
Yeah.
First few dates.
Yeah.
So eventually you knew that you two were super compatible.
Yes. So as far as that goes, I really liked Dad. One of the things I loved about him most, and still do, is his sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he was cute, and he has those, I call them like those Midwestern values, just just common sense and a good person. And Caitlin asked me once, like, how did you know Dad was the one?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, when I was younger, if I would date anybody more than once or whatever, just the way society, I would picture, well, I don't know what it would be like to be married to this person. And it seemed like whenever I would picture myself married to anybody, I never pictured myself being happy. I'm like, well, this guy is cute, but he's super inconsiderate, or, he flirts with other girls all the time, or just, there's always something like, I just don't know if I'd be happy with this person. Or I dated a guy once, he was making fun of handicapped people. Like, okay, that's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Just weren't right. And then when I started dating Dad and I pictured myself being married to him, I pictured myself being happy. And I thought, I know I could build a life with this man. And I know the way I'm picturing it, he's the one. So that's how it was for me.
That's rare, yeah.
And I think I knew after about a month of dating him, and I think he said it was about the same for him.
Yeah.
So, so that's how that went. Yeah.
And how long, I guess, when you were dating, how long until he proposed?
It was about 10 months.
Wow. So I gotta get my act together.
Yes, you do. So I met him in June of 83, and I think we started dating in July of 83, and he proposed Easter weekend, like April of 84.
Okay. You guys got married February 85.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when he first proposed, of course I said yes. And we got engaged at the park on Maryland, Granada Park, yeah. And we were kind of thinking of getting married in the fall. And Maureen had started dating Gene. And she actually met him through another Catholic singles group. It was at the CASA, the Franciscan Renewal Center, which is kind of a more progressive Catholic facility. They have masses and stuff, and they have classes, and they had a singles group, but you could be divorced, and there weren't any,
It wasn't as strict as
it wasn't as
CAC.
strict. It was a lot more laid back.
Sure.
And it was on Lincoln, it's still there. It's on Lincoln Drive, like 68th Street, or not too far from Scottsdale. So she met Gene through that group, and they had been dating. They met in November of 83, and Dad and I were already dating. And so we met him. So we knew she had her first date coming up. So John came over, and before we went on, like, let's kind of hang back and see what this guy's like.
Yeah.
So that's how we met Gene. So after we announced our engagement, they said, well, we're going to get married too, but we want to get married on the anniversary of when we met. So they started shooting for November, and we hadn't set our date yet. So I thought, well, I don't want to get married that close to her, and then December is Christmas time, January, blah, blah. So I thought, well, maybe we can find something, end of January, beginning of February. So I called the church, and they're like, oh yeah, we've got this date available. So I'm like, let's go with that.
Yeah. Weather's nice in Phoenix in February.
Yeah, it was really actually a nice time to have the wedding, because all of, the Schultzes were in Chicago, and February there is super cold. So it was really nice. It was a nice weekend, and it worked out well. So before we got married, we talked about the possibility of having kids, and we were both just on the same page. And I said, if we have kids, I always thought it would be nice if I could stay home with them. And I think Dad he was at the time, I think he could have gone either way. It's like if I had said, oh, I really want to have a career, he probably would have been okay with that. But when I said, he's like, yeah, that's fine, So, but
Was it common? I'm trying to think back to mid 80s.
Yeah.
I know it kind of was starting to go more where women were having careers
Yes.
and having kids, so, but it was still kind of like a 50-50 thing, or was it?
It was probably leaning a little more toward career women than stay-at-home moms.
Okay.
Probably like, I'm imagining it was about 75-25.
Okay, so it
Because
was more of an uncommon choice that you
It was becoming an uncommon choice.
even
it
though
was-
that used to be the default.
Yeah, it was becoming uncommon, and all of my friends that I knew who had kids had all gone back to work. I didn't know anybody that was a stay-at-home mom.
Wow.
But the idea still seemed right to me.
Yeah.
And we just thought, well, the main thing would be, financially, if we could swing it. And we weren't sure, so what we tried to do is live on one income and bank the other. And we thought, well, if we have enough of a little nest egg or pool of money, that if we have emergencies, we'll just try to live frugally, I think we can swing it. So, so that's what we ended up doing. So I had a couple friends at work who were pregnant around the same time as me. They all went back to work.
Wow. Yeah.
So I was like the renegade, I guess.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I took a 1-year leave of absence so that I could keep my job open. And I thought, well, let's see how it goes after a year. And if it turns out it's really a struggle, then I will go back to work. But I didn't have to because we made it work.
Yeah.
So that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was funny because I brought you to work after, I forget how, when you were like a month or so old, and showed you around, and there was somebody that told me, I can't remember who it was, that, Colleen, I knew when I saw you looking at that baby that you were never coming back.
Yeah.
So, and then my friend, Josephine Chu, the one that said, he's so fat.
Fat little booty.
Yeah. So everybody thought you were adorable.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's what happened.
Cool.
And so I stayed home after that. And, every once in a while we'd have something come up, and I think, oh boy, I wonder if I should go back to work. But it always worked out. We always had, money in the bank, and we always got by fine. Maybe didn't take quite as many big fancy trips, but we still took nice trips, and it was fine. I think it worked out really well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it wasn't until we started getting into the college years that, when your kids were older, and, Dad would say, it's going to be expensive, and I don't know. And so I thought, maybe it's time for me to start looking at least for a part-time job. So I started doing part-time work, and
That was when I was 18, or no, how old?
Well, my first part-time job was with the Crisis Pregnancy Center. I think it was
yeah.
in 2001. I'm trying to think. You were probably like, would you have been in 8th grade? I'm trying to remember. But the nice thing about it was it was part-time. It was like from 9 to 3, or 9 to 2:30. It was kind of, you could set your own hours. And it only went around the school year. Like it started in the fall, and it was over by May.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for like a year, 2 years, 2.5 years, I guess. And then it started to become more of a full-time job, and I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, you were in high school, and I wanted to keep an eye on you more.
Sure.
Because I could see you were, a little.
Had some wild buddies.
Yeah, you were kind of moving with a fast crowd, and I thought, it just doesn't feel right to me to be working, devoting a lot of time to a job when I think this is sort of a critical time.
Mm.
So I decided to just quit the job altogether, and so I just stayed home full time for a few years till we got you into college. And then by then, I think I did a year where I did the subbing at the school district. I actually worked as a parapro, and it was similar to the part-time job where it was just, during school hours. So I was usually home around the same time as the kids, Caitlin and Patrick. And then after, I think maybe when Patrick was a freshman and Caitlin was a junior, is when I decided to go to work full time. And I could just tell that they were okay with, I wasn't as concerned about them.
Didn't have as wild of buddies.
Yeah, they had more of a, they didn't have, they weren't traveling with a fast crowd anymore, so, and they got along really well. So I think it would be okay for me to do this.
Mhm.
And it ended up only having to be about 18 months where Dad and I were both working full time because Dad left Chrysler and he was home for 3 years.
That's right. Yeah.
So really, it was about a year and a half that Caitlin and Patrick had both of us gone.
Yeah.
In full-time.
And then there was kind of a role reversal where.
And then there was the role reversal, yeah.
You were the breadwinner.
Where I was the breadwinner and Dad was the stay-at-home parent.
Yeah.
So we kind of did a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it was. So that was good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the time with you kids, and you know, each child is different,
Mm-hmm.
and you all had your own personalities, and you know, I have special memories of all of you, and I probably have more memories of you because you were my firstborn,
Right,
and everything
first.
was new, and you know, you take more pictures, and
Right.
You know,
That's
yeah.
true for same for Lauren. They've got a million
Yeah.
pictures of Matt, about
Yeah.
7 of Lauren, but
yeah,
it's just kind of how it goes.
yeah, but you were always really sweet, and you know, I was like super overzealous, and I would, you know, give you a lot of attention and do all these things with you, and you seemed to be able to, you seemed to soak it up,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so I think it was especially hard for you when Caitlin came along because you were so used to that, and I didn't, you know, I did what I could, you know, you try to do your best, and
Mm-hmm.
so that was a challenge for you, but I think it was good that you had siblings, you know, because it teaches you, you know, how to get along. And
You're not the center of the universe. You know.
Yeah, exactly. So, so it worked out well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So, and just, you know, you were unfortunately for yourself were our guinea pig, you know, the first kid, you don't know what to do, and you
Right.
fret over every little thing.
I know you read a lot of like parenting books.
Yeah, that was
type of
becoming
thing.
parenting books, and some of the stuff I don't think it doesn't work on this kid. You know, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I do what the book says, but he's still doing this. Or,
Right. Yeah.
but you were just a unique individual, and you
Yeah.
had your own way about you, and you
Mhm.
turned out beautifully.
Yeah. Somehow. Yeah.
And I remember with Patrick when he was in preschool, the teachers they seemed to like make a big deal about. You know, Patrick isn't, you know, doesn't always follow directions. And one day I came to school and they said, oh, you know, we did it was like a cutting project. They were making like firemen's hats and cutting them. You know, like Patrick didn't do his project today. And I remember thinking, the old me, if it had been you, I'd be like, oh no, I have to, you know, get him special help. And I'm thinking to myself, he's 3, I don't care.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't feel like making a hat.
Yeah, I know. And so, you know, I'm like, well, and they were like, they're like, we'll give it to you to take home. Maybe you can do it at home. And I'm like, thank you. And then I kind of like in the background, I'm like, oh, you know, maybe he's having a little trouble with the fine motor skills because he didn't seem to like do stuff like that. So then,
3's pretty early too, because everyone
Yeah.
develops at different speeds.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he was fun. And the other thing is, one of his teachers, she had a son who I think he had to repeat kindergarten because he maybe was a little immature and he just wasn't ready. And I think she was transferring her worries about him onto Patrick.
Yeah.
So she's like, I don't know if he's going to be ready for kindergarten. And so I took him to one of those gold dust things. It was like kindergarten boot camp. It was just like, you know, summer fun classes. And I talked to the teacher there and she's like, he's fine. So I'm like, good. Because the teacher he had at preschool, she wasn't really a certified teacher. She was just, you know, a mom.
Yeah, the standards for preschool teachers weren't, you know, you didn't have to have a lot of credentials.
Right. So anyway, it worked out fine.
Yeah.
But you learn with each kid.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I remember with Caitlin, when she was little, I had a friend over, and I was saying, oh, you know, you learn to be less, you know, you don't worry about each kid with the next kid. And Caitlin was climbing up a little ladder thing, and it just as I said, you know, I don't worry about her. She like fell, landed like right on her face, and I'm like, now here I'm being all catty, and my kid, you know, I wasn't holding her, you know, but she was okay.
And yeah, that's true. Yeah, you just can't be super helicopter. You just gotta let
Yeah.
kids, you know, do their own thing. Within reason.
Yeah, and I think having a good memory helps you with parenting because it helped me like remember what it was like being in, you know, first grade or whatever, and it would kind of help me step back and, you know, identify with what you kids are going through a little bit. So, but of course you all, had your own personalities, which I think is great. You don't want your kids to all be like robots.
Yeah, carbon
You
copies.
want them to have their own individual, personalities come through.
Mhm.
You all did.
Yeah. So let's start with me.
Okay.
What were the baby Tim strengths and weaknesses you could say? What was I good at early and what was I slow on?
You were good at everything.
Okay.
You were you were just so smart. And because I had some baby books, like my sister Kathy gave me a book called Your Baby and Child, like things that are typical at 3 months and this and that. You were always like way off the chart. You were off the charts for weight.
Oh, yeah, that too.
And like all that stuff. But you definitely read early, and I would go to these parenting classes and hear about ages and stages. I'm like, boy, Tim, I wouldn't always say it to them. Like, Tim was doing that like months ago, and then they had a thing where they said, oh, bring in your child's favorite toys. So we had these little shape boxes. It was like a cube with holes in it that were shaped like a star and a moon and this and that, and you loved that thing. You were like 18 months old.
I still remember it was like yellow box.
Yeah, it was yellow with the
Yeah.
blue. I think all the pieces were blue.
Different color shapes.
And
yeah.
you had that mastered at like 18 months. So I brought it in to show to the class. I'm like, no way. Your kid's only 18 months old. My kid couldn't do that. And I'm like, oh, And so I guess, so just things like that would come up. And then, like I say, the big revelation to me, one thing that a piece of advice that somebody gave me when I had you, I decided to try breastfeeding, and I had a little struggle at first, but I got the hang of it. And Dr. Shearer said, typically it's good to wean them. If you're going to do it, by about a year, it's best to wean them. And he's like, anything beyond that, it's usually a little silly. But I mean, there's always different opinions. So I thought, okay, I'll shoot for that. Well, first I was going to try to do it for a month, and I kept expanding it. I thought, I'll do it until the baby's a year old. So one of my friends said, one thing that helps with weaning, because it's a weaning process for the baby and for you, because you're used to having that closeness. So they said when you start giving up a feeding or whatever, replace it with reading. So you have the child in your lap and you hold the book, and instead of nursing him, you're reading him a book. And that'd be really good advice, because I started reading to you more, when you were like a year old, even though you couldn't read. But I would just show these little chunky books, like A for apple, or here's a ball, or whatever. So I would do that with you, and when I was trying to wean you, and like I say, one night I was sitting in the lazy boy reading the paper, and you came up to me and you just started saying, B. Like, why is he saying that? I didn't understand. And I closed the newspaper, and on the back page of the newspaper was a giant letter B. I'm like, oh my God, and you were like 16 or 17 months old. I'm like, oh my gosh. So in your bedroom, I had wooden ABC letters on the wall. So I picked you up and I brought you into your bedroom, and I pointed and I said, what's that, Tim? And you said, B. Like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing.
Wow.
So I like, this kid is really smart. So that was my clue. So then I started reading to you these little books more often, and then by the time, I forget how old you were, you had the whole alphabet down before you were even 2. So, and then I think when you were about 3, when you were in preschool, we were like cereal boxes and going to like McDonald's or Burger King, you'd see a big word, and you remember saying, that says free. Like, he's 3 years old, he goes, that says free. That says good. It's like, I don't know how you knew that, but you did. So you were picking out words at 3 years old. So, yeah. And then when you were in kindergarten, I remember your teacher telling me that she would, have you read to the class a little bit. Like, she'd be reading a book and she'd have to go, and she's like, Tim, you take over. You're in kindergarten. And then I would have you read at home, and I noticed that sometimes you would like skip a line. You'd be reading like a paragraph, and you'd skip a line and this and that. And I talked to the teacher about it, and she said, well, that's called tracking. And she said, that's a skill that children don't usually develop until they're like 6 or 7. And she said, he's so smart that he's reading early, but his body or development hasn't caught up yet with the tracking ability. But she's like, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. So I'm like, oh my gosh, these are like high class problems, you know, for this little baby genius. So yeah, you set the bar pretty high.
Right. And I got all that attention.
And you got tons of attention.
So that had an unfair advantage compared to the other two as
Yeah.
far as just one-on-one time.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you were really amazing. And of course the chess thing was another big thing. You know, when you were in first grade, they introduced a chess program, and they had like an open house or a parent night, information night. So we took you, and you seemed to really like it, and Dad liked it too. And
Did
so
Dad play chess before? I guess I can say that.
I can't remember if he did or not, but you both kind of did it together. And I think that's why you liked it, because it was a bonding thing for you and Dad.
Yeah.
That's what sparked your interest, but you were so good at it, you just went from there and, you know, became the #1 6-year-old in the country.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was really a neat thing. It was fun. So,
How about Caitlin?
Caitlin, you know, when I was pregnant the second time, I remember thinking that I probably will say I kind of wanted another boy, because I thought society is so strange right now. I guess I wasn't sure how to raise a girl, because again, I'd been sort of brought up one way and society was changing, and I thought it's hard being a woman these days, just with, you know,
Career
women's
versus
lib and
kids.
career and kids, and there was just a lot. I'm not sure how to, because I don't know if what I'm doing is right for everybody, and you know, I don't know. So I thought, I don't know how to raise a girl. And the other thing I worried about was if I could love another. I loved you so much. I'm like, how do I ever love anybody like I loved Tim?
Yeah.
But and we didn't know if she was a boy or a girl. So we were surprised with her. And
Is there a way to tell, or did you want to be surprised?
well, when we first went, we said we didn't want to know, and they said, well, it's a little early to tell anyway. I don't know if they could tell, and they just said that. And then the second time I went for an ultrasound, they said, actually, the baby's too big now, we can't tell, because she wasn't facing the right way. I don't know if they made that up. So we didn't know. Like, well, we'll be surprised. So anyway, I thought, I don't know if I have a child, I like a boy, but I'm worried that I'm not going to love the child as much as Tim. And the minute I saw her, I could feel my heart go bing. And I thought, if anybody can be a woman in this day and age, it's this baby.
Yeah.
And she was like a dream baby, because she slept through the night at birth in the hospital, which is
Whoa.
unheard of. She was just the easiest baby in the world. She slept a lot, which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
She slept a lot. She didn't get gas. She was just always smiling and happy, and she was just so good-natured, and she was like a dream baby. And I noticed with her that it was a little different with you, like the things that you seem to like a lot of stimulation, but with her, sometimes it was too much for her. Like I would remember, I used to put you on the piano and have your feet, you know, like play the piano with your feet, and you would be like, and Kate would be like,
Yeah.
So it was like overstimulation for her, and so I would scale back. So you just learn with each child. She knew her colors before you did. That was her claim. She knew her colors at 18 months.
Wow.
So, and I knew she was smart too. You all were. I think you walked at 9 or 10 months, and I think she walked at 11 months.
Okay.
So she was just a little bit behind you, but she was really sweet, and she was a daddy's girl. You know, she just melted his heart, and she was just super sweet. And one of my favorite stories about her is there was a little boy that lived next door to us, and they were like evangelical Christians, and
It was the Lindsays.
and they had that little boy Drew, who was Caitlin's age or close to it, and he was kind of he could be kind of a brat, and they didn't believe in Santa Claus because they thought the idea of Santa Claus was pagan.
Worshipping a false idol.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he came over to our house, and he was talking, and it was Christmas time, and he said, Caitlin, is there a Santa? And she said, yes. And he said, no, there's not. It's really your parents. And she's like, Honey, is there a Santa? I said, Santa comes to our house every year. And he said, Santa doesn't come to our house. And she said, that's because you're bad. And I'm like, yes, Caitlin.
You tell that bratty kid.
Yeah, she put him in his place.
Nice. Caitlin
Yeah.
was tough and smart and all that.
Yes,
For
she
her
was.
age.
She was. And you were in the gifted program, and when she was in the age that they tested for it, I thought for sure she would be put in it. She tested for the reading part, but not the math, which really surprised me because she struggled with reading. And I could tell she was good at math. She seemed to really like numbers, and she also, there was one day you came home from school and there was like your teacher in Miss Thomas, the problem of the day, she would have this thing on the board, and it was a math problem with, it had something to do with toothpicks, like rearranging them to have this and that, to make 2 squares versus this, and nobody in your class could figure it out. You couldn't figure it out. You and Dad were looking at it, and Caitlin came over, and she was like, in 2nd grade or 1st grade, and she's like, I think I know, and she went, and she figured it out. I'm like, whoa. So, yeah, so she figured out the problem of the day that none of us could figure out, and she really liked math, so she didn't test into the math program. So then I talked to her teacher about it, and I said, I don't know if I should put her in the reading one because I don't want her to, get discouraged. And she said, well, if I were you, I would put her in it, because she said that actually that reading test doesn't really test their reading, it tests their comprehension skills and their listening skills, because a lot of it's dictated to them, and they know the answers. So she said, I think she'll rise to the occasion if you do. So I put her in, and she did fine. And then with the math program, I told the teacher that I thought she should be in it. She's like, well, let me give her a different test, and she did, and she made it into it.
Wow, okay.
So she did great.
She did both math
She
and
did
reading.
both of them,
Yeah.
and she did fine. So and she did well in school. She did great, and she was one thing that I'm glad that we did. My friend Mary Huber, she was in this organization called Trail Maidens. It was a YMCA mother-daughter program. And I liked that, and Caitlin she said she would like to be in it. So it was a nice time for us to bond and do girl things, and I always enjoyed that time that we spent. And it kind of forced me to kind of get out of my comfort zone a little bit. We would go to these little away camps, like in Prescott, and we would sleep in a cabin, and with all the moms and daughters. So it was fun. It was real laid back. It was like a laid back version of Girl Scouts.
Yeah.
But I remember they had a karaoke night, and I was like real shy because I thought, I'm trying to set a good example. So Caitlin and I, and the Freezes, Nicole Freeze and her mom, we did like a disco song together, and stuff like that. So that was fun. I enjoyed that. So, but yeah, she was always a sweet kid. And when she was in high school, she was very on the ball. I would kind of have to reel her in because she wanted to do everything. She was in band, and she was in academic decathlon, and she took karate, and I used to say, Caitlin, you're gonna spread yourself too thin. And I never worried about her because I thought she's just a real go-getter. She'll succeed anywhere she goes in life, and she had the good people skills, and she does have that ability. She can do anything she wants. And she's developed really good language skills, obviously, and she's still good at math and reasoning, and so she's got the whole package.
And then how about Pat?
Patrick, he is so sweet. So the funny thing about Patrick is, Dad and I weren't sure. We sure wanted 2 kids. We were sitting on the fence if we wanted a 3rd, and I always felt like, I feel like there's another one that wants to be born. I don't know how to explain it. And he was a little bit of a surprise.
Oh.
But I'll share this. So the first time that Dad and I ever went away by ourselves without kids was when you were about 4 years old and Caitlin was about a year old. So I can't remember if my parents or Maureen. We actually went, they had a weekend getaway package at the Hotel Del Coronado.
Oh.
So Dad and I went to that, and we were there for like a 3 or 4 day weekend. And after we came back, I was pregnant with Patrick.
Wow. I actually heard that from someone, but
So, okay,
yeah.
so yeah, that's how Patrick came along.
Wow.
And I was,
Planned, yeah.
and so I told Dad, and he's like, it's one more person to love. So he was fine with it.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, this is the one that wanted to be born, because it was kind of a long shot. I'm like, it didn't seem like it would have happened the way things were going with my clock and stuff.
Sure.
And I'm like, wow, this was a long shot, but apparently
Yeah.
it was Patrick. So, and Patrick was funny. He was such a pretty baby. He was so beautiful.
I remember, yeah, he was such a cute kid.
He was really, like a Gerber baby, and he was so fussy. He had colic, and I think now probably it was his digestive system was a little immature, so he would get really gassy. He would cry all the time, especially around dinner time. He would get super fussy. He didn't sleep through the night until he was almost a year old, and he wouldn't take naps, and he was up all the time. And I remember one of my friends said, since you had that baby, it's like you fell off the face of the earth. It's like, we never see like this because this kid is like so demanding and I can do it. But he outgrew it, like right around a year old, he started, out of the blue, he started taking naps, sleeping through the night, and he was fine. So, yeah, he turned out to be a really good, he would throw tantrums too. The other kids, and it was like the classic pounding. He'd throw himself on the ground and pound and kick and scream. And I don't know where that, and again, since he was my third kid, I would just put him in his crib, like, tell me when you're done. And he'd get over it. And then I had this thing where I would sometimes put him in his car seat put the car seat on the floor, and just to kind of hold him down. And I'm like, let me know when you're done screaming and I'll, unbuckle the car seat. And every once in a while he'd say, I need to go in the car seat. So I'd put him in it, and then I'm like, let me know when you're done.
So you just flail in the car seat?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they'd scream, and sometimes he'd scoot it around the floor. But he outgrew it. So.
Wow. And then how about Pat's, reading colors, all that stuff?
Yeah, his claim to fame was he could drink out of a cup at 6 months
Wow.
before any. I think I need to take a little break, and then I'll come back.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Pause it.